There we are.
Hey, we're live.
Welcome to another segment of Buddycast. I'm here with my new friend, Dave Blazek. For those of you who don't know, Dave is the creator of the comics. If you ever read the newspaper nowadays, Loose Parts. Yes, I still have this book, by the way.
Wow, cool. Attack of the Chortling Stomach, yes.
Yep.
Only but goody, yes.
Yep. For those of you who live in Erie,
You'll
Pennsylvania.
have to get this one now. This is the latest.
Ooh, what's that one?
Quirky Rectangles of Mirth.
Sweet.
Available at the website near you.
Sweet. Yeah, for those of you who don't know, he's the creator of this comic strip. You can find it in your Sunday paper, especially if you live in my hometown, Erie. I saw yours today.
My hometown of Erie.
Oh yeah, yeah, your hometown too.
Born and bred.
Yep, I saw your saw your strip today, the one about the cell phones on the wall.
Yes, it's targeted for old people.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Hey, it's always you got to hit the different targets, you know.
Yeah, it's funny you do because you forget where you work, like what audience you work for. So it's this weird ongoing thing of being relevant and timely, and still paying a salute to your target audience, of which I'm a firm member of the target audience, but I'm much more decrepit than I appear. Age and demeanor, but so your concept, like I find, like you draw an office space these days, it's all cubicles, it's not desks, and so I hate drawing cubicles, but it took a long time. You have to draw, doctors the way doctors look now, not the way they look. It's I don't know, it's a comedy thing. Sometimes you have to wrestle with what's current and what's the trope that's in people's mind, because the joke plays off of the images people have built up over their years of experience. So the question is, do you draw the picture differently to be current and blow the joke, or do you, so it's an ongoing struggle. Really, we get the cartoonists all the time. Matter of fact, I was just talking, we had to do a little Zoom thing with Dave Coverly and Hillary Price and Nick Galifianakis the other night. And we were just talking about that. Like, how do you stay modern? How do you, like the question came up, if you drew a joke and you put someone in a wheelchair in it to show, that there's people in wheelchairs in the world, which is the right thing to do, but do people concentrate and say, why did Dave put a wheelchair in there? Is the joke in there? And then you've distracted it. It's like doing stand-up where you've made a gesture that's blown the punchline because they're looking at that rather than figuring out the punchline. So did that make any sense? I don't make any sense. So anyway.
Yeah, fine. Yeah.
I can talk for hours. Yeah.
Let me ask you, how'd you get the idea of becoming a comic strip artist?
I didn't. I accidentally became one. And I mean that in sincerity. I never took art training in school. I never did it in high school or college. I didn't doodle. I didn't do any of that stuff. Okay, so here's the story. Might as well get the whole thing out of the way. So I grow up in Erie. I go to prep. I go to Barron. I head off to Penn State to get a degree in journalism, which I do. While I'm there, I revive a magazine called The Froth, which is like The Onion or the National Lampoon of Penn State. So I started early. That was my sort of real. Well, I actually had a humor column in the prep newspaper, and then I had this sort of magazine playground at Penn State that I spent a lot of time doing. Got out, promptly got a job in a factory. So I worked at Inland Container Corporation off of 12th Street, just under the bridge, where my job was shoveling out the ink pits under printing presses. So just the perfect training for any cartoonist. That's the path you're going to want to follow. I got laid off from that job. They have not called me back. That was 40 years ago. I begged my way into the newspaper in State College at Penn State, the Center Daily Times, by sending the general manager socks and telling him these were going to replace the ones I will knock off. They didn't have a job for me, so they gave me I showed up and they gave me a job. My desk sat under the front counter, so that when the first thing you saw when you walked into the Center Daily Times was my forehead sitting under the counter. I sold classified ads to used car dealers, and I was a horrible salesperson. So the only way I could sell an ad was to make them really creative. So I started making these really creative ads. Like I sold a guy a blank page in the newspaper because right at the bottom was a little thing saying, for the best deals in town, hold this page up to the light. And on the other page, I had his logo flipped so that when you held the page up to the light, you saw it there. So I did all this and I started making these ads, and I really liked that part of it, and I didn't like the rest of it. But I had a journalism degree and I was working in newspapers. Even if I was making $7,000 a year, I still felt good. But my wife, my fiance at the time, had moved back to Lancaster, Pennsylvania, then moved up to the Philly area. So I decided to try to get a job at the Philadelphia Inquirer. And I picked up the phone and we called, and there happened to be a job in their promotion department. I again sent socks and various objects and pictures to the guy until he hired me. So there I was started at the in-house ad agency at the Philadelphia Inquirer, and I didn't leave till 37 years later. So over the years, I became creative director of what's called Media Lab, which is the in-house creative and marketing group at the Philadelphia Inquirer. So for a huge period of time, I had an entirely different career. So in my lifetime, I have written and directed over 500 radio commercials and maybe 125 TV commercials. I was a graphic artist just anything creative, speeches for them, campaigns for advertisers all over the country. And so I really got into advertising. So there are still people to this day who don't know I'm a cartoonist, who only think I'm an advertising guy. So I picked up some Clios and some Addies and awards doing that. But then I started doing stand-up in the 90s in Philadelphia. So, cable was hitting on, the whole comedy thing started burgeoning. And probably like you, I was in a club one night and the guy was really bad. And I thought, geez, I can do better than this guy. So I took a class. They have a thing here called mainline school courses. It's like night courses. And it was taught by a comic who turned into a booker. And he was like, you're pretty good, you want to do this. So I started playing, restaurants and bars and the clubs in Philly, and I played the Kimmel, the big center in town where the Philharmonic plays and stuff, and a couple of comedy clubs in here. So I did it for like 4 or 5 years. I gave it up because my kids were really young at the time, and going out on Friday and Saturday night was not a good way to be a father. So back to how this happened. So the editors at the newspaper said, Dave, you're a funny guy. Like all the radio commercials and TV commercials they did were almost always funny. You do this stand. Would you want to take a look at the submissions for the comics pages? The syndicates would send them the submissions and they would pass them by me. And I kept saying, well, these aren't funny. And I kept saying it so much. The one guy kind of said, okay, Mr. Smarty Pants, why don't you try it yourself? But I didn't draw. I didn't know how to draw. Luckily, I had a partner in crime at the Inquirer, a guy named John Gilpin, who was a really facile cartoonist and still is to this day. He's had stuff in Playboy and Saturday Evening Post and all in the national magazines and stuff. So we gave it. I like to tell you, we gave it a shot. He had to ask me about 7 times, the editor, to do this until he finally called me on the phone and said, he retired. He called me on the phone. He says, I am looking for talent for one of the syndicates. I agreed to do that for them. You should really do this. So I wrote 30 cartoons one weekend, 30 jokes, and my friend drew them up the next weekend. And before we knew it, a guy from Los Angeles flew to Philadelphia, took us to lunch, put a syndicated contract in front of us, and we signed us as syndicated cartoonists. Now, it doesn't normally happen that way. People generally try for 10 to 15 years. They don't usually just send 30 cartoons. Now, I found out later, they knew we were newspaper guys. They knew we could make deadlines. They knew they could count on us. He vouched for us. So Loose Parts was born for the first year under the hand. It was drawn by somebody else. About a month into that, I got contacted by Comedy Central, which had a show called Dr. Katz, Professional Therapist, around the turn of the century. And they asked me to write jokes for that and their cartoons and their comic strips. So I did that. So I was working a full-time job, raising 2 small kids and writing Oh yeah, 60 jokes a month, one a day for 2 different comic strips for a year, and it was a lot of fun. And then in 1 week, South Park showed up, and they canceled Dr. Katz to make room for South Park, and killed the comic strip. And then my friend got sick; he got cancer, and he's fine now. Matter of fact, he's the last guy I had dinner with before the pandemic hit. But he said, I guess we're not going to do the comic anymore. And I called the syndicate and said, hey, you mind if I draw it as well as write it? And they asked, because they're smart professionals, do you know how to draw? And I said, no, but I can learn. And there was a big pause on the other end of the line. And they said, sure, go ahead. And I hung up the phone and I turned to my wife and I said, my God, what have I done? And so I had to sit down. Now, I was a graphic artist. I knew how to get stuff into print and stuff, but the early days were hard because I had to write around my inability to draw. I mean, I could show you, we can shrink. I could show you the very first loose parts ever. It takes like 3 seconds to draw. So let's do a quick screen share. Oh, there it is. You can do it now. Okay. Can you see this? Okay. So the very first one I ever did was a straight line. And on top of that straight line was a really badly drawn salmon. I'm going to try to draw it as badly as I did then. Little salmon fin. Guess it was a shark fin or something there. Like that, and a little stuff like this, and then I think I had another line like behind him like this, and then I had a sign right here that said, boy, everybody's really excited watching paint dry here. This one said, down, and it was called Salmon at the Mall, with a salmon going up the down escalator. So this was the quality of early loose parts drawing that people got, and let me blow that away now because it hurts to look at it. So that's what I did so early on, but and it took a long time, like 3 hours a day that I didn't have late into the night, most nights, to sit and draw stuff or rewrite around it till I got it. But in a weird way, when I was writing them and someone else was drawing them, they weren't as good. I'm a longtime friend of Mark Tatulli, who does Leo and Heart of the City and is one of the great working cartoonists over the last decades or so. And we knew each other from the ad business in Philly. And he just said, now you may think you suck, and you kind of do, but at least your drawing now matches your humor and the joke seems to work. It comes right out of your head onto the paper. So anyways, I did that, and I did it, and it I kept at it, and that was 20 years ago, and now I've done 7,300 some in a row, and they're a lot better now. So trust me, people who look it up or Google loose parts cartoons, they don't look like that anymore. I actually know how to draw now, but it's like one of those things. It's almost impossible not to get better at doing something if you do it every day, and I did it every day. It was just a real labor in the early part. But later on, it's nice now. One of the things that got me through is I didn't realize how fun it is to draw. Like the actual experience of putting pen on paper and having music on and sitting in your studio is really cool. So that's the story. That's how I accidentally became a cartoonist. But now, and it took me a long time. I had this little wrinkle where people would ask me, what do you do? And I'd say, I draw cartoons. I didn't quite say I am a cartoonist. Matter of fact, I got lucky last year and won the Reuben Award, which is the Oscar of cartooning for the best panel cartoon. And I used that occasion to stand on the stage in front of my fellow cartoonists and say, I finally now can say I am a cartoonist after all the time. So it took a while for me to make the adjustment myself, but here I am. So
now for your comics, where do you find the daily inspiration? Like, what's like?
I don't write them every day. I write them in bunches at the beginning of most weeks. I'm a really good, I started out as a writer, and so that part comes pretty easy. I generally sit down, it takes me about an hour and a half or so. I can write a dozen jokes, of which I'll draw probably 7 or 8 of those. So the writing comes pretty easy, and it hasn't really drawn up. And there's a great quote that I like to share, especially when I talk to like schools, and the art kids are all in the front, and they're all got funny color hair and wearing black, and they want to hear that, it's magic. But the great quote is by the artist Chuck Close, and he said, inspiration is for amateurs. Professionals just go and work every day, and from the work, ideas come. So if you think you're just going to sit around and I can't do this, or I can't create whatever it is, I can't paint, I can't write a piece of music, I can't start my novel, I can't write a set for a comedy routine, I beg to differ. You just have to go get it. Now, it's not to say that jokes don't come to me. I literally had one come to me in a dream like a week or 2 ago, fully formed, wasn't gibberish, great joke. That's rare, but generally you got to go get them. And the writing process is staring. It's staring at a wall or a ceiling. I hate to not, it's hard, and staring is painful. And I used to hesitate to tell people that that's what I would do, smashing stuff together, thinking they would go out and do it. Just try it. I recommend everybody just try staring at a blank wall and think for 5 minutes. It's a really long time. Thinking for 15 or 20 or until you come up with an idea that may or may not go. It's a painful process till you get used to it. So I'm pretty certain most people will give up, and I'm pretty safe.
Alrighty. Now, you touched on this a little bit, and I'm not sure if you have one necessarily, but can you explain, like, do you have a certain style of art, or is it just like your...
Yeah. Nobody has eyes, because I don't know how to draw eyes. Although it's worked really great, because I do like the blank. I really got a letter from a fan one time years ago that, Dave, I love how you've made the decision to give everybody these blank glasses so the reader then reinterprets the... No, I don't know how to draw eyes. I just... and it's become a thing for me. And I find that there are ways with the glasses that I can and I can show you. Let's share the screen. Can you share the screen one more time, and I'll show you what I mean. Even though I don't draw eyes, and maybe make the brush a little bigger so people could probably see on this. So if I draw a guy like this, and if I want him to look really stupid, I'll give him smaller glasses, round them out, and make them farther apart. Now, and he has kind of this dumb-witted, I just, don't know what's going on expression. But then with just, if you change the shape of the glasses to like these little elongated ovals, now the same guy kind of has a more serious kind of look to him on it. And then if you want to make him the boss, instead of the schmuck who shows up, you can give him a big square. So it's funny how basic shapes can just change the demeanor of a character. So after a while, I learned how to just use glasses to make that stuff happen rather than do eyes. So I do them occasionally, but very rarely. Even my cavemen and stuff just have a line for them. And it works as a nice style. I like that. I don't have too much action in my things. I like to think I'm very literate in what I do, but I do like the reaction. I've always been proponent that the idea is comedy is in the reaction shot, not in the joke telling shot. And often it's the person listening to the stupid person that really sells the joke rather than a real active kind of crazy thing. And I'm also a proponent of letting the reader finish the joke in his or her head rather than me telling it. Like a really bad comic or a really bad joke teller at a party, you know, two guys walk in a bar, you know, two guys, one was a rabbi, one was a priest, a rabbi, and a priest, and they over-tell it. So if you tell just enough to get the joke without over-explaining it, it involves the reader, and I've done my job, and makes them feel part of it and makes them feel smarter, and they are. And so all of this, my style and everything kind of came together in that sort of thing. So, but it took me a really long time. For the first 5 years or so, almost any of my jokes, you could probably I've taken them, stood up on stage and told them as a stand-up joke, and they may have worked. And the picture was just there. But as I got better and learned to draw, I now can have the picture carry the joke as much as the weight of the words or the idea, if that makes sense. So, so that's my style. And you crib a little bit from here and you crib a little bit from there, and but all cartoonists kind of do that a little, and it's turned out nice, and I'm happy with it. And it seems to be recognizable, so I'm happy.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned earlier, like, you draw the punchline. Do you think of the punchline first, or do you kind of like get an image in your head before you do it? And
I'll show you. It's right here. It doesn't leave my side too much. So all my jokes start out as words. A very few sketches. I don't have a sketchbook like a lot of cartoonists doodle sketches. And I mean, it's really fascinating talking to different cartoonists and seeing how they work. There was a guy named Jerry Van Amerongen, who did a thing called Ballards. He just retired after 30 years. But he gave a seminar one time at one of our conventions, and he just had an overhead thing, and all he did was start moving his pencil. We're looking at it on the overhead, and it swirls and just lines and just almost looks like he's trying. Then he's like, I kind of see a guy dancing the tango, and he's kind of coming out of a room, and the joke just like grew out of the page. So he came at it from just drawing it. I sit down and I look for premises first. I try to find a really juicy premise. So I generally think, I'll want to do, I don't know, I want to do one about airplane, an airline, and it's okay. Then I'll just picture the front of an airplane, like the pilot sitting in there, and then you start thinking, what if it's not? What if it's a pilot? What if it's animals? What if it's flying the plane? What if it's a pilot and a vulture flying the plane? And then the rest of it then you're like, there's an instinct that says there's something funny there. And then eventually it comes around. I finish the joke where the pilot is a vulture. The co-pilot is on the mic, and he's calling down to the tower, and he says, listen, unless you kill something down there, we're just going to keep circling for hours. So sometimes you start with a juicy premise, and then and the joke almost writes itself, when you're done.
Yeah.
So
I actually thought of a joke in between that. Like, as you were just explaining it, what if the pig was the pilot, and something about like, well, pigs really do fly, or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, and the trick is, though, to not always take the low-hanging fruit. So the idea of the pigs fly but it probably would have been rejected. My brain would say, yeah, it's not quite good enough yet. It's always like making a joke one step better. Early amateurs, oh, that's good. Like, okay, puns, okay, sometimes, okay. But try to go a little further and see if you can, the real pros spend a little. That's that extra 15 or 20 minutes I'm talking about, when you're sitting in the chair of being a pro is forcing yourself to go a little farther to have that joke come out. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's like comedy where, you may have a one-liner, but it's how you can make that one-liner into a story.
Exactly. Exactly. And how changing a word or two can just change it. I'm always in a constant struggle of how much, if I make mistakes, it's when the thing is too wordy. but I get into this thing where lots of smart people read newspapers and read comics, and I want them to be able to figure it out. But I also have to allow that some people aren't just going to get it, and they're going to stop rereading me if they don't get it. So do I add the extra phrase? And I'm trying to think off the top of my head of an example, and I really can't. But it's also a real struggle for me. How little do I say? And sometimes I even look at it, it's like, I could leave this caption off altogether and let them figure it out. Like here's a good idea. I had one time a cartoon where it's just a salesman knocking on the door of a company, and the company is the Knock Knock Joke Company. And he's knocked on the door and he says, I hate this part. Because, figured it out. But I got people who wrote to me saying, and they'll say, who's there? And you say, so do I stop him saying just, I hate this part? Do I not say anything? Just have the salesman knocking on the door and let people, or do I go all the way and say, I hate this part? They're going to say, who's there? So I stop in the middle. I split the difference on those two. So that's an idea where the more sophisticated is not to say anything and let the joke stand, which is really cool, which I would love to do. Go in the middle so there's a little explanation, or drop it off, or really go overboard and blow the joke, or blow some style points on the joke. So,
yeah. Now, when you submit to local newspapers and whatnot, what's the submission process like?
Well, I don't. I'm now with the Washington Post Syndicate, Washington Post Writers Group. So they have a group of salespeople and editors who constantly go around the country and overseas and berate newspapers to carry me. It's a tough hoe because newspapers are, as you know, suffering on the downswing. I'm still a huge proponent of newspapers, as you might imagine, for a guy who spent 35-year career trying to convince people to buy them. I really believe in newspapers. I got a journalism degree because I wanted to be Woodward and Bernstein. I wanted to start out to be a reporter, and to this day, I think people are going to regret not supporting the newspaper, because when they go away, no one else will do that. Anyways, I'm get off of my preaching now, but yeah, so they send them around. So I have a lovely editor there, Amy Lago, and when I signed, this is actually a pretty interesting thing. So I started at the LA Times Syndicate. There was upheaval in the newspaper industry. The Tribune Company bought them, so I was with the Tribune Media Company in Chicago for a long time, and I wasn't happy just for a variety of reasons with there. And you may have heard me reference the Reuben Awards, and I don't know if people know this. The National Cartoonist Society, which is the largest, most august group of cartoonists there are, and it covers not just newspaper cartoonists, but the Disney animators and video game people and New Yorker cartoonists and all sorts of illustrators and graphic novelists. And every year, they put us in a hotel in a city somewhere and pour alcohol in through the windows, and it's marvelous. And we're all weeping because last weekend we would have all been in Kansas City for it. But anyways, a couple years ago we were in San Diego, and it was late, like 1 a.m, and we had just finished cartoonist karaoke, and we were all had more than a few beers, and this woman walks up to me and says, hi, Dave, I'm a fan. I said, well, yeah. She goes, oh, so how is it there at the Tribune? I said, I'm not so happy. And she just took a beat and said, why don't you join us at the Washington Post? And I was like, okay. So my agent was there, lawyer was there, she was there. We hammered out the basic part of the deal, and not knowing this until another cartoonist said, that's Amy Lago. And I said, yeah, she's nice. She goes, that was Charles Schulz's editor. So now my editor is Charles Schulz's old editor, which is tough to argue with someone who has that kind of track record. So
does that go on the resume?
Yeah. That's and she earned every bit of it. She's a tremendous editor, and she saves me from myself all the time. And I just, there's something nice when you grow up in Erie and you're at Barron and you want to get a journalism degree, and you can kind of only dream in the distant future of working for the Washington Post, and now to end up kind of working for the Washington Post, even if it is in the comics pages, is pretty damn cool, man. That's like, it's pretty damn cool. So,
yeah. You mentioned Charles Schulz. Are there any of those people like Charles or Jim Davis from Garfield or any of them, like I should say the icons of comics,
Well, it's unfortunate. The icons are passing away. Unfortunately, I just missed meeting Charles Schulz, or Sparky is all the thing. I joined the National Cartoonist Society in 2001, and he had died just months earlier. I got to know his wife a little bit, who's great. I did not meet him, but plenty of the other guys, Mort Walker, El Jaffe, certainly all the Mad Magazine guys over the years, Jim Davis, the New Yorker giants, Blackman, Charles Booth, all these guys. And it's sad that generation is passing. But it's a joy just to go to these conventions and absorb all this stuff. And one of the benefits of me becoming a cartoonist in midlife, at age 43, was that I was never burned out on it, having done it from a kid. So I'm like a fanboy, hey, wow, look, it's more. And I carry a sketchbook with me. Will you draw a picture for me? And so, in a way, it's a very, I'm still excited about the whole deal. It's nice. It was a nice midlife change, and it's a great thing to do. When I finally decided to retire from my newspaper job, this is something I can do for as long as they have me, and not without having to take a train into the city every day and come home and work late at night and weekends and stuff like that. So it's been a real blessing, and the community of cartoonists is generous and funny as you will think they are, and just hanging out and talking with them has been a blessing. It's really nifty. It's funny, I was talking to my wife about this, who's in the pharmaceutical business, just today, that I've been having weekly Zoom calls, and we're trying to stay connected. It's funny that other professions don't seem to do that, and I don't know why that is. Like, there seems to be a community. You hear musicians have a community, or comedians have a community, or cartoonists have a community. But do accountants have that? Like, I don't know why an accountant wouldn't have it. It's a talent. It's the same. It's just a different skill, but it's a skill. But yet they don't seem to have this same sort of convivial beer drinking. Somebody says the Reuben weekend is it's not cartoonists with a drinking problem, it's drinkers with a cartooning problem. So it's a weird thing. There must be something about the arts that we have to follow a path to business that is different than normal past or normal careers, that we need to support each other. I don't know the answer. It's just an interesting question.
Absolutely. Now, if there was someone out there who was thinking of becoming a cartoon artist, or something like that, what advice would you give them today?
Well, number one, know what you're getting into. It's just the business side of it. It's changed immensely. It's harder and harder to find places to sell your work and to make a career out of it. I always used it. Thank God I had another career and another job, because I'm not sure I would have made it financially for a long time having to do it the other way. And that being said, some of the very best cartoonists working today have a nice middle class lifestyle, but they're not immensely rich. So you're going to do it because you love it, and you're going to do it because you do it every day, not because you think you're going to do it for the adulation and the stardom. That being said, one of the things I always like to point out when I come back to Erie or I go to other places is that somehow, and I was as guilty of this as anybody, you grow up in places in America and other places, and you somehow fool yourself into thinking that only people from New York and Los Angeles are talented. Like, somehow I can't be nationally syndicated. I can't have a national profile as a comedian because I didn't grow up in New York and Los Angeles or something. Now, you may eventually have to go there, but talent doesn't know where you were born. Talent just knows talent. So if you've got it, you've got to work at it to make it come out. So it's going to be hard, but if you want to do it, do it. Now, there's all sorts of cartooning. There are, strip cartoonists who tell stories. There are graphic novelists. There are, animators. There are commercial illustrators. But one of the biggest mistakes I see is everybody thinks I only have to learn how to draw. Again, I've given talks where you see art kids at school, the middle school, and they're all cool, and I don't do math, man, because, I'm an artist. But you can't. You've got to, all that learning is like, if you're playing football, you never stop in the middle of a football game and do a push-up, but the push-ups and the weightlifting is what gives you the strength to do the thing through. So if you're not well-read on a wide variety of subjects, you don't have any fodder to pick from. You don't know, you don't have anywhere to find a joke. Or if you're just not well, paying attention to human experience or reading novels, you don't have a feel for the human experience, so you can't tell a good stand-up story. So you've got to concentrate on all that other stuff too, even though it seems like not the stuff you really want to do. And then I also say don't overlook. Like, listen, I wasn't classically trained as a cartoonist, but I was training without knowing it. I worked at a newspaper. There's no place that has faster deadlines than a newspaper. There are very few jobs. Like, I was making radio commercials. The fastest radio commercial I ever did was a funny radio commercial with 3 actors that I learned how to do at 10 in the morning. I wrote it, cast it, recorded it, edited it, and had it at the radio station 3 hours later. So you learn how to be creative quickly by exposing yourself to jobs that are demanding deadline stuff. The more time you take a creative job in anything, it may not be a cartooning job, but if you're working at an ad agency or you're working in a communications department at a company, you're learning not to be scared of blank sheets of paper. Like, lots of people are frightened by sitting down on blank sheets of paper. That doesn't frighten me anymore. So, and then, like, by directing TV commercials, I learned how to block out scenes. So I was looking at a square, and I had 30 seconds to tell something, and I had to have people looking the right way. And same thing with doing a 30-second radio commercial. You've got to be funny, but you've got to have a message, and you've got to do it quickly, and you've got to do it on deadline. So there are ways of looking at the other things you're doing in your life that will train you to do this, if you're only open to that. So, but nothing replaces just drawing every day and writing every day. Like you said, like I was listening to one of your other friends, a comedian, about how often he writes every day. It's an everyday thing. I don't know how often you write, Nick. I mean, at least you got to do it once a week, right?
Oh yeah, any chance I get, it always comes to paying attention to the day. Like a good buddy of mine once told me that a good idea for writing is to wake up every morning, just take your notebook and just write. It doesn't have to be comedic.
Yeah.
From what you dream to what's on your mind right now, because that gets the clogs moving.
Yeah.
To the day. So
and for me, look at watching stand-up gives me cartoon ideas, and it's really weird in that it often has nothing to do with what the person, he or she, is talking about. Like, it's something that immersing yourself in creative stuff just tunes your brain to the right frequency of the creative ether. That stuff will just show up to you. So exposing yourself to other creative people and creative stuff, or I grab a volume of New Yorker magazine, cartoons, or I'll look at a Far Side cartoons, which is mine is. I get that most often. You're the Far Side, you stole that from the Far Side, hasn't been around in 20 some years, although he's making a bit of a comeback now. And man, that's a compliment to me. He was one of the greats. He blazed this trail for me. Exposing yourself to all that stuff. The trick is just doing it. And like I said, talent doesn't know where you live, doesn't know what kind of room you're writing in or where you are. It just knows whether it's good or bad. And so I encourage everybody to give it a shot. Because other people aren't, and a lot of it is, I don't know, it's like maybe maybe when you started doing stand-up, that was that you watch people and you're like, I could be better. I got myself in trouble a lot by saying that I could do better than that, but she's doing it, you're not, he's doing it, you're not. So get in the game but as you know, stand-up was sort of an entirely different animal. There's a lot of things that look easy about it that aren't. And if anything, the thing I hate most about cartooning, and it's gotten better now, but in the early days, the internet was growing and stuff. Your feedback was on a delay. Like I put a cartoon, people email me or they'll respond on Facebook or on Instagram or through the syndicate websites or something. It's great. But it's not like telling a joke and having them laugh or not laugh right there. So that immediate feedback from stand-up is a really painful or fun thing that can gauge. And one of my favorite theories was the reason I thought cartoons sucked so much was because I'm not sure the creators knew if they were doing good or bad, because people had to write a letter and stick it in the mail, and only the people who liked you would go through all that trouble. So in a way, now somebody on Twitter who thinks you suck can tell you suck right away. And there's a little value in that because, maybe I do suck that day, but the trick is I'll do one tomorrow and you'll be sitting at home in your underwear. So, but yeah, it's a fascinating process. I still love to go back and do stand-up. I've always told myself to do it, to go back and try it again someday, see if the rust has fallen off. I was okay. I think I would classify myself as okay. I think I had a 25-minute set when I stopped, and I never got higher than the middle act of a 3-night or 4-act, and that was only because somebody didn't show. So I have played in front of a room of 4 people. And I did play in a room of 40 people who didn't speak English. Those are both fun stand-up nights.
Tell me about it.
I also played and the other one was there was a famous rock club in near Philly called Ardmore 23 East, and they got the idea that they would have stand-up comedy on like a Tuesday night, and so somehow I got roped in, and they plugged the mic into like a 10-foot stack of speakers for the heavy metal band at the same volume. So when you told your joke, it was at the level of Metallica playing a guitar chord. And so the 4 people in the audience literally pushed their tables to the back of the room. And the comic in front of me got so frustrated, he jumped off the stage, went over and sat at their table and did his bit, his act at their table. So yeah, I've had all of the bad parts of stand-up comedy with none of the good parts.
Trust me, I know exactly where you're coming from. I've performed in rooms like Juniors. You've ever been Juniors before?
No.
Whenever you come back, you got it. Once all this stuff clears up,
Yeah.
Because it's our local comedy club. But I performed in front of a room that you'd expect for them, and I've also performed in front of a room that had a total of 8 people in there, counting myself, and 5 of us were performers that night,
Yeah. But then again, there are other nights where you say hello and everybody laughed like you didn't know why. You never wanted to leave the stage, and they're flashing flashlights at you to get off, and you're still kind of hogging the stage until you got it milked every last laugh. So you're making me homesick for this now. But when I was in Erie, there were no comedy clubs. There wasn't a single comedy club when I left Erie, so I didn't have that opportunity or that chance. I'm glad to hear there are some now. There was the occasional bar that would do it, but there was nothing at that time.
Yeah. So right now, what we have is Juniors Last Laugh. That's like the Washington Post of newspapers for us right now.
Cool. Yeah.
So we have Juniors, and then so that's like the big shot. If you make it here, if you make it there in town, then you have that level of confidence.
Yeah.
Juniors brings in not people like Jerry Seinfeld or anything like that. Well, they bring in bad,
really good working comedians. There's
exactly. They're bringing in the people that will definitely make you laugh no matter what.
Yeah.
So But then we've had a few open mics here and there.
Yeah.
There seems to be like a clique-in area of the same, like everyone knows everyone who does stand up, and if not, it's because that person is trying it out for the first time, and
right,
you're going to see them at least 5 more times. But
yeah, oh, it's cool, man. I'm glad to hear that there's a thing there. Hey, maybe if I do it, I'll come back and sign up for an open mic, and they'll wonder who this clown is.
Absolutely. You and me will be right next to each other. We'll say
I'll call you. You'll be my contact. You'll be my thing. And it says Nick sent me. Told me this and told me it would be okay. Then I'll make jokes about phonograph players and all the stuff that old people would know. I'd have to contemporize my act.
I'd like to thank Nick Sorensen for inviting me.
Yes, so blame it on him.
Today. Me going under the table.
Yeah, blame it on Nick when this goes south. It was all his problem.
Yep.
We're bringing all the guy out. It's like bringing in an Ellen King back in from the old days. Like, I'll come in a tuxedo with a glass of scotch in one hand, like do the real old Borscht Belt Ed Sullivan's level of comedy, which is great, man. Just
really
fan of those guys. You talk about influences. A lot of my stuff is, I grew up in the Robert Klein was a particular favorite of, those guys, of course, Carlin and Klein and stuff. But Mitch Hedberg was a huge Mitch Hedberg fan. And, even more recently, Dimitri Martin and those kind of guys, that non-linear, almost far-sightish kind of like humor on stage, that high-end intelligent stuff. I was a huge Dennis Miller fan before he went to the dark side somehow. But man, his early stand-up, I think that's maybe the hardest I've ever laughed at a stand-up show, just because it was language heavy and really fast and with all these oblique references. They hit you, the structure of the joke was there, but he'd hit you with all these cultural, so you could laugh at any one of a number of spots in his stuff. Hedberg was just great. It's just sad we lost him. Robert Klein was kind of the same way, very literate writing. But the old guy, you watch the guys, you know what I'm saying? I'm saying Ellen King and those early tuxedo wearing Ed Sullivan show kind of guys. They worked so many nights. But I was lucky enough to see, Jay Leno when he was very early on. I remember seeing Ray Romano in the back room of a restaurant in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, when he was like 21 years old, starting out. We were able to see Seinfeld here before anybody knew he was anything but a stand-up comic. But I remember one night Leno played, I think 3 nights here in Philly, and we went and saw him every night. And that's where you really got to see how good he was. For one thing, a lot of the jokes you thought he was just telling, he told them exactly the same with the same amount of freshness to it. But other nights he was able to read the crowd. I've always told people that they say, "Oh, you were a comedian." I says, "No, I was a comic." Comics get up there and they tell jokes, and some of them are good, but comedians read the whole room and the people, and they're so good, and they've got so much stuff, they know what to do. And I did not get to that one. I was still a Padawan apprentice. And you only do that by, I guess, working all the time.
Yeah, it's just like what you said with art, you just got to keep going at it until.
Yeah. And, people will let you know. I mean, people do let you know, you've got to forgive yourself and suck a little bit, but if you suck for a really long time, then it's maybe time to change. I like playing music and guitars and pianos, and I dream that I could get up on stage and sing. But I committed to myself that I just don't. I don't have that performance level ability, so I just play, with guys and friends, and we jam together. But you have to admit to yourself at a certain point that what you can and can't do. But
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Hey, I'm gonna wrap it up here with this one.
All right, brother.
Where can someone find all your comic strips?
Well, you can always, in Erie, I'm in the paper every day. So get a paper in Erie. Loose Parts is there every day. Also, you can see it online every day at a site called Go Comics, GOCOMICS. and carries most all the comics, but you'll see it every day. And there's an archive underneath it, so you can underneath every panel, so you can go back 20 years and look at all 20 years of my stuff there. You can go to my site, loosepartscomic.com. And I'm updating it, but I have stuff there, and that's where you can buy my books. If you buy my books on Amazon, I can't sign them. Amazon's very weird, but if you buy a book from me through my site, I always draw on it and I always sign it, and so you'll have something really cool. Yeah. Yep. Did I do it? Yep. So there you go.
Do a little selfie in there too.
Yeah. And you can always email me at looseparts@verizon.net, and the web address and the email address is in the bottom of every cartoon. So if you forget what they are, just Google Loose Parts Comics, and you'll see a bunch of them. And my contact information is in there. And let me know. I ask people to write me. I answer almost everybody who sends me a letter if I can, because it's fun talking to people, and I like doing this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, this was Dave Blazek, creator of Loose Parts Comic Strip. Thank you for joining us. I certainly learned a lot.
Yeah, great. Thanks for coming on. I hope this keeps growing, and I hope you'll have me back when you're big. Remember the little people. Remember the little people who did it the first week, Nick. Exactly. Yes, and I particularly like this angle. I feel like I'm sitting on your hassock, like we're in your living room, and I'm kind of looking back, sort of up your nose, like if you had a cat, you would be the view we would see if we were Nick's cat. So it's a nice setup.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sitting in I just got this recliner this year, so
yeah.
I call
it. You may be the only talk show host there is who sits in a recliner while the whole thing. So when you get the late show gig,
this thing's coming with me.
You'll have the whole desk and the fancy Hollywood thing, but you'll still have the recliner, and Starlets will be backing up when you put the seat up, the leg thing up. Yeah. It'll be your signature. It'll be your logo.
Exactly. If you ever went to Jamestown, New York, they just added that new. They added that new. I
know. I was going to go when I came up to Erie this month. I was going to go, but I can't go anywhere. I'm stuck here on the edge of Valley Forge National Park here in my treehouse studio.
Yeah. So. You let me know, because I've got a membership. So if you ever want to hit it up.
Oh man, that'd be great. We can meet. I'll let you know. We'll meet there, and you can show me the thing. But But the best thing about the pandemic is it changes nothing for cartoonists. Now everybody is like a cartoonist, dressing badly, sitting in one room all day, drinking.
You can go to work in your underwear and no one would judge you.
Yes, underwear. How fancy do you think I am? Don't pan down. All right, brother. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. Yeah.
Say hi to everybody in Erie for me.
Will do.
Okay.
We'll definitely do. Let me know when you're in town.
All right. See you guys. Thanks.
Yeah.